Are you the fanatic we're looking for? Welcome to the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is the only interactive and dynamic mock draft simulator. Dynamic means that the picks from one mock draft will influence the players that team selects in the next mock draft. This can be done with a first-round challenge. This can be done with a second-round challenge. This will be done with any mock draft from the Draft Professor. In addition, the Draft Professor has rank players functionality, allowing you to rank players and build your own big board and then compare your board to that of other users at the Draft Professor. In addition, the Draft Professor has draft a team functionality. This allows 2 or more users to snake draft a team of 22 players from the rookie pool, and then you can debate which players you like at which position and why. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, welcome to Quarterbacks Week. This is the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, and I'm joined today by Anthony and Bill. Anthony, how are things going with you?
Going good. Always excited to talk quarterbacks. So this is gonna be a good one.
How are you, Bill?
I'm great, Jim. It's Friday night. We're wrapping up Quarterbacks Week. I'm a little sad because we're wrapping up Quarterbacks Week. You know, being a Cleveland Browns fan, I love talking quarterbacks, having 40 of them since 1999. I just can't get enough because I see all the other teams that have quarterbacks, and it just makes me want one. So I just enjoy talking about them. But I'm pretty excited to talk about them tonight. But before we do that, a little housekeeping for the folks that are here. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button for us. Make sure that you subscribe to the Draft Professor YouTube channel because we've got daily draft content coming down the pike, folks. Not just stuff like this in Quarterbacks Week, but scouting reports, analysis, all sorts of things. Make sure that you also share it out with your friends. Make sure you turn on that notification bell so you get notified when we go live. Make sure that you follow our lovely moderator tonight, Jim, on X, NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. You can follow me on X as well, at Spark Scouting, and my lovely co-host, Anthony_Russo97 on X as well. But with that, Jim, how are you doing on the final night of Quarterbacks Week?
So I'm doing pretty good. It's definitely been a great, this is the first Quarterbacks Week ever. This is the week to celebrate the quarterbacks in your life. If your team is still playing, you probably are celebrating your quarterback. And if your team isn't playing, you're probably thinking, I need a new quarterback. So we covered 5 quarterbacks last night. The 5 quarterbacks last night were Ward, Sanders, Milroe, Dart, McCord. And then we're going to cover 6 more tonight. Mm-hmm. And we will probably cover other quarterbacks throughout the draft cycle. But we decided just to kind of stop ourselves at 11 before we just got too crazy. But if anybody listening wants us to check out a different quarterback, we do have a few more that we could have added to this episode. We just chose to keep the episode shorter. So with that being said, the first quarterback that we're going to talk about is Curtis Rourke from Indiana. So, Bill, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, so Curtis Rourke from Indiana is 6'5", 230 pounds. I got to see a lot of Curtis Rourke up close and personal, living 45 minutes away from the Bloomington campus. This guy is a very good anticipatory thrower, and he has really good mechanics. Consistent footwork. His throwing motion is consistent. You could set your watch to this thing. He's got a really good frame at 6'5", 231, kind of a well-built quarterback prospect. A really good natural field general, commands pre-snap adjustments with authority, has no problems making calls at the line, both from a protection and an audible standpoint. The one thing that I will mention, he is tough as a $2 steak. What other quarterback prospect do you know that tears his ACL in the early summer, early fall, and chooses to play the entire year on a torn ACL? And then, oh, by the way, he broke his thumb at a certain point. So now he has a broken thumb, a torn ACL, and then he helps lead Indiana to the college football playoff. That's a big check mark for me, and that's a big plus in my book. The big negatives that I have on Curtis Rourke, though, is he is a pocket passer. He's not going to break away and scramble when things break down like a Cam Ward or a Shadur Sanders. He is also late to pull the trigger on some throws. There's some throws where it's there, and if he pulls the trigger, he's good, but he just takes a half second to overthink himself. He is also older. He'll be 24 when he enters his rookie season, so he's a little bit of an older prospect, so you kind of have to wonder if this is going to be it for him. For me, he is my QB5 right now, right in that probably third round range, probably within my top 100 picks. My comp for him, he reminds me a lot of Jimmy Garoppolo in that same style, a guy that can move, but that's not his game. His game is to deke and dunk his way down the field, but he has the arm to throw it deep if you need him to. A very good spot starter, but probably a career backup at the next level. But Anthony, what do you have on the Maple Missile, Curtis Rourke?
Great nickname. A lot of what you said. I think
Love it.
the prototypical size is what you first see. 6'5", 230. I mean, he definitely looks the part of an NFL quarterback. Incredibly tough. You talked about the injuries he's played with, dealt with both the torn ACL, when he had that thumb injury against Ohio State, just constantly never willing to stop playing football and helping his team. I referenced the Ohio State game, and I think that's where a lot of the problems that he has as a prospect show up. Just if pressure is in his face, it is not a good time if you're a Curtis Rourke Indiana fan. He really struggles with both being able to deal with pressure in terms of delivering throws, and also like what you talked about, he just does not have that mobility to be able to get outside the pocket and extend plays. So if you give him a clean pocket, he is essentially an NFL point guard. He is able to find open receivers and make all the throws that you would want of an NFL quarterback. But if the situation is not to his liking, there's going to be serious problems. So for me, he's a day 3 guy. I think he definitely deserves a spot on an NFL roster. I would agree with you. I think he is a career backup that can come in and potentially be a starter in certain situations. But if he can learn to deal with pressure better and be able to handle those big situations, I think he can. He has NFL starting caliber ability, but for right now, I don't see it.
Okay, next up, Will Howard from Ohio State. Bill.
Yeah, so Will Howard from Ohio State. So another guy, another big quarterback prospect, 6'4", 236. He really has good torque generation and a good arm when you're throwing in the intermediate parts of the field. I think that's probably his best throwing ability, is in that between that 10, 20-yard range. Very good clean footwork operating under center. This is a guy you could stick in a pro style offense and not have to worry about, do I have to rebuild his footwork, similar to like a Geno Smith we talked about on Tuesday. A very good rhythmic passer when he's protected. When protection breaks down and pressure gets in his face, that's when it becomes a problem and things kind of start to fall apart. He cannot reset when he's knocked off his marker. His hips get very tight, and if he's knocked off his spot and has to reset and throw, his hips won't allow him to turn, and it leads to a lot of inaccurate balls. He also, his processing speed does dip a little bit against more exotic blitz packages and that pressure. So if that pressure's in his face, it's going to cause his processing speed. He takes longer. He panics. He just starts to immediately panic, and just everything goes out the window. He also is going to be a little bit of an older rookie. He's going to be 24, so you have to wonder how much more development are you really going to get out of a Will Howard type of guy. I have him right at round 4 right now as far as the quarterback prospect, a day 3 guy. Again, another one of these backup, maybe a spot starter for an NFL franchise that their true starter goes down or needs to take a week off for injury reasons, but he wouldn't be a full-time starter for me. My comp for him is Kyle Orton. Same way Kyle Orton in Chicago and Denver, how he wasn't the guy, but he was a guy for them. So he got them week to week, but he was never really that guy that you could rely on. There's a lot of good traits from Will Howard's tape, but the biggest thing is if pressure is in his face, all of those traits just immediately go out the window. But Anthony, what do you have on the Ohio State signal caller?
Yeah, Will Howard's a guy that's kind of actually like grown on me, kind of as the season has gone on, and he has had moments where you still see the struggles. You talked about it. He still doesn't deal with pressure well. I saw him stare down receivers a bit too much, creating those turnover-worthy plays. But I think he has the NFL arm. I think he has that he has that mobility and that ability to get outside the pocket, extend plays, and make plays from outside the pocket. I think you can invest in him, and if you surround him with the weapon, you kind of would have to build the NFL version of Ohio State. If you give him great weapons around him and a good offensive line, I think he could actually be a pretty solid quarterback in this league. It is just like you talked about. He can't deal with pressure well. If things aren't going well, it's not going to go well for your team. And I also just think in general, his decision making is questionable at times. We'll see. He plays in about 15 minutes against Texas. So potentially, if he has a big game tonight, and if he gets another game against Notre Dame, potentially that could change for him. I have him as like another early day 3 guy that you can bring in, can be a quality backup, but I don't see long-term starter for him.
So it's interesting listening to you, Anthony, and I have an AFC East joke for you. Could you comp him to Tua?
In terms of, not really in terms of like physical profile, but in terms of like being able to sort of lead an offense, I could see it.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Like when you said like you have to surround him with the NFL version of Ohio State. It's my biased opinion that that's Tua, right? Tua is not going to be a quarterback. If you put Tua like on the Raiders, he's going to be just as bad as any other Raiders quarterback. But the fact that he has Waddle and Hill and a really dynamic running game is what makes that Miami offense go. But that's a biased opinion because I tend to not like Miami. So
neither do I.
No.
Next quarterback, Quinn Ewers from Texas.
Yeah, so I'm glad Anthony hit on the college football playoffs because the other signal caller on the opposite side is Quinn Ewers from Texas. 6'2", 209. He's a very efficient point guard when the pocket is clean. If he has time to throw and that pocket is clean, he can wheel and deal. He also has a natural sidearm motion that allows him to generate torque and velocity on the ball very easily, even when his mechanics aren't in lockstep with each other. Very good ball placement on the short and the intermediate game, especially when his feet are set and his mechanics are working. But now we get to the problem when he's under pressure, those mechanics go out the window. He stands flat-footed. He can't step up in the pocket. He bails on plays too early, tries to use his athleticism to make something happen. He's not a great thrower on the run, again, because he has problems setting his feet. He also, his arm talent is functional, but it's not the greatest. It's above average, right? It's probably a step down from some of the top guys in this class. For me, the biggest thing is his processing. He often, after his first read processes, he just immediately runs to the check down rather than working his way to the second read, the third read. He just, first read's not open, throw it to the check down, which is fine. But that's not going to be an NFL franchise level quarterback. That's going to be a spot starter level quarterback, a journeyman backup. For me, I have him again in that early fourth round range, day 3 guy. He's like diet Jay Cutler, right? He's like Jay Cutler in the fact that Jay Cutler was a very good point guard, but he also had a cannon. If you take a couple notches off of Quinn Ewers' arm strength, that's what you have, or a couple notches off Jay Cutler's arm strength, excuse me. That's what you have for Quinn Ewers for me. He hasn't declared as of yet, to my knowledge. I would strongly advise him to return to school and clean up some of these issues with pressure. Especially, I would like to see him go away from Texas. I just feel like the Texas allure and the ceiling is too high for him to break through at Texas. So going to a smaller school and becoming that big fish in a small pond would be best for him to be able to showcase some of the things that he can do. But Anthony, how do you feel about the Longhorn signal caller?
Yeah, so actually, since we've been sitting here, Adam Schefter did tweet about 10, 15 minutes ago that Quinn Ewers did tell ESPN he plans on declaring when their season is over. So sorry to spoil that dream for you. I would have agreed with you. I do think he should have probably transferred somewhere. I would have suggested Ohio State, but that's another conversation. But no, Quinn Ewers, man, he's a guy I wanted to like so much more. Like, because there are moments where he looks like QB1. Like, he makes some insane throws. Being able to, his arm strength he has the arm strength. He has that ability to pinpoint deep passes. I can get over the throwing motion. Like, I've never been a guy that's been like too worried about that. If you get the ball where it needs to go, I don't really care how it gets there. But when the mechanics become so just terrible, when you're off balance, when you're under pressure, when you're trying to make something happen, and then it becomes an issue. It is just so noticeably bad sometimes, and he misses on. It's not even when he's under pressure. Sometimes it is just easy completions that any NFL quarterback would make, and he just misses. He just misses easy throws sometimes, and it leaves you scratching your head so much. I think, again, like, you see it kind of. I love how he does. Again, he has that arm strength, and he's willing to use it. Like, he is willing to throw the ball down the field, which is not something that you actually get from a lot of top quarterbacks. A lot of quarterbacks prefer these, short and intermediate throws. Quinn Ewers will throw the ball down deep, and he's not afraid to do it. The problem is it just doesn't work out as much as you would want it to. So at this point, if he is officially going to declare, another guy that I would have as a day 3 guy, I agree with you. I think he is a backup. I would just be so scared to make him a starter if he doesn't clean up these bad habits. So, that's where I'm at with Quinn Ewers.
So I'd like to offer a devil's advocate for why a player who we're labeling as a backup needs to come out. Okay. So this is just the contrarian opinion. Do you think a year more in college would change your opinion that Ewers would be a backup?
I think it would depend on what he would change. And that's why I think he would need to leave Texas, because he's now had 2 seasons as a starter under Steve Sarkisian, who is a great offensive coach. But it's just not, for whatever reason, the mechanical issues, and the issues with just, again, those making those easy throws just aren't being fixed. So listen, maybe it's a relationship thing. Maybe it is just the psychological aspect, if you will, of Arch Manning, the heir apparent, constantly being on you. And it, on the surface, it seems like they've dealt with that fine. And, there was never any doubt that Quinn Ewers would be benched, but that has to be on your mind at least, right? Like, that if you really screw up, you're going to get eventually thrown out, or at least the fan base is going to call for you to get thrown out. So I think a change of scenery, a new coach who could have really worked with him on those mechanics and stuff like that could have helped. I see what you're saying.
But it's like, yeah. So Anthony, forgive me for interrupting here, but my question was not necessarily more of my question was, would it raise his stock so high he would be a day one pick? Like, meaning that, do we think that Ewers with one more year of college would improve to be a day one pick? And I don't think the answer to that's yes. He might go from day 3 to day 2, but meaning that, to me, the scouting report on him doesn't change much. He's better off going to the NFL so he can basically just sit behind somebody, work on the mechanics, and get to his second contract quicker.
Sure. I mean, I don't even know if money, he would have made millions of dollars probably if he was a starter with NIL money. But I think, like, you have a guy like Will Levis, for example, right? Like, he had mechanics issues, but he was able to get to the second round and compete for the starting job very quickly. That Quinn Ewers that's not going to happen with Quinn Ewers. He's not going to be a starter, barring some crazy scenario. Whereas if he had stayed one more year, improved his consistency and some of his mechanics issues, I think he could have competed for a starting job. I don't know if necessarily he's a, early, like, day one guy, but, if he could have, like, gotten into the top 50 and potentially competed for a starting job, I think, depending on where he wound up.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback on it too as well. I think if he did come back, I think there's a possibility that he could find his way into the top 32 because of a couple of reasons. Number one, a lot of the things that he can fix are very easily fixable. They're mechanics based. Mm-hmm. The second part of it is we've seen guys like Jaden Daniels left Arizona State, went to LSU, went from a 5th round grade to a number 2 overall pick. Joe Burrow went from Ohio State in a 5th round grade to number 1 overall in Cincinnati. So it can happen. My other concern is with Quinn Ewers just going to the NFL and sitting those mechanics. If he doesn't improve anything or improves very little, I don't think he gets a second contract. I think he would be a free agent and then a spot starter 1-year deal, because in his current state, he should not see the field as a rookie. I just don't see that. That would do more harm than good for him. So now you have to take him, and now you're an NFL GM. Do you want to spend a 4th or 5th round pick on a quarterback that's a backup to your starter that you can't in good conscience put on the field the rookie year? That's basically saying this 5th round pick you might as well just push it into 2026. So if I'm in Quinn Ewers' team, my thought process has to be, if I'm going to come out, especially with NIL money nowadays, if I'm going to come out, it has to be worth it for me to do so. Look at, and he went back to school, but I'm going to use the comparison. Look at Carson Beck. Carson Beck, he's getting $4 million a year in NIL money to come back to Miami, whereas a 2nd round pick selection would be probably $1 million a year. Yeah, it delays that second contract by a year, but it also gives him that extra added year of, I don't have to worry about, say Quinn Ewers goes to the Raiders, for example, and he sits behind Aiden O'Connell because they don't take a quarterback at 6. They take Quinn in round 3 or 4. Let's say O'Connell stinks up the joint and fans start calling for Quinn Ewers and he's not ready and they throw him into the fire anyway. Now you've just said, okay, well, we're going to throw Quinn out there. Quinn's not ready. Now you've damaged Quinn Ewers and he's not going to see that second contract. So that's the tightrope that quarterbacks have to walk, especially, and it's a balancing act. But I think he could have come back and definitely been a high riser. Even though the 2026 class is that good, there's a lot to like about Quinn Ewers. There's also a lot to hate about Quinn Ewers. Hate's a strong word. A lot to dislike about his game, and a lot that scares you about his game. There's a lot of highs and there's a lot of lows too.
Next one, Tyler Show from Louisville. Did I say that effectively?
That's what I'm going to go with. I've seen Show. I've seen Shuff. I'm going to call him Tyler S, but Show works. 6'5", 225. This is a guy that's very athletic for his size. Very, very physical athlete, can run and move with the ball. He also has very good light feet to float in and out of the pocket. Strong arm. This guy is probably one of the top 5 strongest arms in this NFL class this year. He's got good zip. He can place the ball down the seam, post, corner, flag, anywhere you need to put that ball, he can put it there. However, just because he can put it there does not mean he can get it there. He's a fastball thrower. I talked about it last night, being a Randy Johnson type of quarterback. He is a pitcher, fastball, all gas, no brakes. So I'd like to see him work on kind of layering it, taking some touch off. The other thing, and this is the biggest concern for me with Tyler Show, he gets very sloppy with his mechanics when trying to throw on the run. He's a very good pocket passer. He's a very good runner. He is not a very good throwing on the move quarterback. So for me, again, he's right around late round 4, early round 5 type of guy. This is a guy that you can bring into your team. However, the biggest negative on his scouting report, he's going to be 26 years old during his rookie season. His development ceiling is going to be very limited. This is a guy you are taking pretty much as he is. There's not going to be much development beyond that. This is a guy you can bring in, again, backup, spot starter level. Kind of reminds me of Brock Osweiler in that same mold. Osweiler was a little bit better throwing on the run, but the same kind of athletic, big body quarterback who had a really strong arm, but had some deficiencies in his game. Anthony, what do you have on Tyler Show from Louisville as far as your scouting report?
Yeah, so Tyler Show's interesting, and I always say I'm the last person that should criticize age and injury history as a negatives because I was such a big Michael Penix guy. But 26, like you said, and this injury history is alarming. Broken collarbones, broken fibula. Like, he has been through it in terms of his health. So obviously he played this past season and he played very well, but that has got to be something that you're concerned about if you're even considering drafting him anywhere. I do think he's one of those guys. He just makes all the throws I think that you need him to make, and he has like the velocity on his passes. I think he's able to see the field very well. It's years of experience, and you can kind of just see it in the way that he plays. You talked about it too. He is athletic. He's not, not a Josh Allen athlete, but he is that physical runner that is able to make things happen with his legs if needed. Other than age and injury, I do think the mechanics aren't always there. He needs to work on that. I don't really think he throws with touch as much as you would like to see. Definitely something he can work on in the weeks and months to come. And another guy, I feel like we've said this with everybody, but it's true. Pressure really gets to him. Obviously, pressure gets to every quarterback, but pressure is especially getting to these guys. Like when you talk about like a Cam and Shador, like they deal with pressure and are still able to make big time throws at a high enough clip. Whereas like the guys that we've been talking about, Show included, like they just feels like everything crumbles around them. And so I think that is another thing that really needs to be worked on. I would take him later, if at all. Honestly, I would even consider not drafting him, but because again, the age and his injury combo is alarming. In addition to just the concerns with him as a prospect, but there are things to like. I could definitely see him being that sort of journeyman, career backup that kind of just is there for multiple teams over the course of his career.
Yeah, and he is one of the guys. Will Howard is as well. We talked about him earlier. They are going to the Senior Bowl down in Mobile. We covered him on our Senior Bowl episode last week. I think Tyler is one of those guys that needs a really good showing in Mobile, and I talked about it. In a class that's kind of clamoring for more quarterbacks. Anthony, you and I and Jim, we talked about it before we kicked off the episode tonight. There's a high demand and a low supply for quarterbacks in the NFL right now, and teams are clamoring for it. And if he shows off down in Mobile his arm strength and his athletic ability, there might be a team that might say, hey, yeah, he's 26 years old, but so was Brandon Weeden when the Browns took him in round 1. What's to say we can't take him here in round 4 and try to get something out of him for a couple of years?
Wasn't Penix older when Atlanta just took him in round 1 as well?
Yeah, Penix I believe it just turned 24. Yeah. And I don't know if he's 25 now. I don't know when his birthday is, but yeah, Penix was older and had the injury history as well. It had really rough injuries when he was at Indiana. So it's not like, and again, I think Penix had a lot more to like about his game in general. But the age and injury history can be, I think, you can get past that if you're an evaluator, if there's enough there. So yeah, if he does show out in Mobile, shows like you said, Bill, show the arm strength, show the accuracy, and show the athletic ability, then yeah, he could definitely climb draft boards.
Want to give a shout out to Ryan Sparks in the chat. So Ryan, you are definitely the fanatic that we are looking for. This is probably the 4th or 5th podcast you've been on this week. So thank you very much.
Yeah. And just to double back on Tyler's show, but kind of in general, I think the Senior Bowl is going to be key for a lot of these guys we're talking about tonight. Will Howard, Tyler Show, the last gentleman on the screen right now, Riley Leonard, because we just saw it last year. Michael Penix and Bo Nix going into the Senior Bowl. There were a lot of people that said they were top 75 to 100 guys, right there, round 2, round 3 guys. And with their performances at the Senior Bowl, they ended up in the top 13. So we can definitely see the Senior Bowl is going to make or break some of these quarterbacks, including Riley Leonard from Notre Dame, 6'4", 216. Again, another guy that I had the pleasure or displeasure of watching, depending on what game I was watching, living 2 hours from South Bend. But he's got really good athleticism and good mobility. You can expand the playbook with him, design QB runs. He's got the arm talent to drive the football in the middle of the field. The big thing about that, his deep passes are very catchable. They're thrown with good timing, good touch. It's not like a fastball. The big thing, though, is his lower body mechanics, and I'm going to put this as politely as I can, are a dumpster fire. There is a lot of times where the footwork is just happy feet dancing all over the place, where the hips are over rotating, causing too much torque or not enough torque. It's negatively impacting his ball placement and his accuracy. In addition to that ball placement and accuracy, it often pops up on the short and the intermediate parts of the field. So pretty much from 0 to about 15 yards out, he's pretty inaccurate. So he can throw a really good deep ball, but in the short and the intermediate stuff, the check down stuff, he's a little inaccurate. And in the NFL nowadays, with a lot of cover 2, too high safety looks, they're not going to give you that deep ball stuff. You have to learn to deke and dunk your way down the field. So that's one of his biggest issues, is I don't necessarily know if he can do that. For me, right now, he's probably kicking off round 5 as far as a draft grade for me right there. My comp for him, it's cheap, but it's the same since they both attended Duke. It's Daniel Jones 2.0, folks. It's what you're going to get. And I know as soon as I say that, someone in the chat is going to be like, so Daboll's going to take him number 3 overall this year. I don't wish that on Giants fans. If it happens, I'm sorry. I'm not planting my flag on that one. I'm picking the flag up, folding it up, and going home. But I think Riley Leonard's a very good guy. He's a good serviceable quarterback. I could see him as a backup that could expand your playbook. He could be that tush push quarterback that we see. Like, for example, in Cleveland, they would bring in Jacoby Brissett or Jameis Winston, a bigger quarterback, to kind of run those 3rd and shorts or 4th and 1s. Or if you have a quarterback that's maybe not as mobile, you could bring in a Riley Leonard on a designed quarterback run to help you get 5, 6, 7 yards. But right now in his current state, he's probably nothing more than a journeyman backup, which is okay to have those on your NFL team. But he has the athleticism to add some things into an NFL playbook, but not necessarily as a passer. Anthony, how do you feel about Riley Leonard from Notre Dame?
Yeah, Riley Leonard, I 100% agree with you. I also have Daniel Jones written down. It is a super easy comp to make, but I think it is actually really the right one. Riley's interesting because, he doesn't. I wrote down he's a game manager in a good way. Like, he doesn't really do anything special often in terms of being a passer. But I think he takes care of the ball, which is a trait that I don't think gets appreciated enough for a lot of quarterbacks. He does make good throws to the right player when he needs to make them. It's also kind of a knock because he's not really asked to push the ball down the field as a passer. A lot of his throws are checkdowns to running backs or quick passes to the tight end or whatever. So it is sort of a interesting thing to watch. His team wins when he's not the best player on their offense, and that's kind of like, again, it's a positive in a way, but it's also a negative. So I'm not sure what that really means for him. It probably does mean he is another like day 3 backup journeyman sort of thing. You're 100% right about the lower body mechanics too. That is like when he does try to make those downfield throws, those mechanics get really out of whack. And again, I really don't think I'm a huge mechanics guy, but like when it's like abhorrently bad, it's bad. So yeah, that's definitely something he can work on in Mobile. He's a guy, and you kind of alluded to it. I definitely can see him as sort of a goal line quarterback, kind of runner / thrower. This is a weird comparison to make because it's not really apples to apples, but like a Taysom Hill-esque character, like in an offense, except Riley Leonard's actually a quarterback, whereas Taysom Hill's just whatever he is. But
Anthony, I like that take. Like when you were going with that Taysom Hill thing, I think that was good. And then I started thinking, okay, where is there a 8 to 12 year veteran quarterback that doesn't do quarterback sneaks?
Matt Stafford in Los Angeles. And if there's anybody that can fix those mechanics, it's Sean McVay.
Yeah.
Yep. And did Stetson Bennett, like he missed his rookie year, like he was like in rehab or something, wasn't he?
Yeah. He's off the team, right?
Yeah, he's on the not the physically unable to perform, but the non-contact, the NFI report. The rumor is that he had some issues and ended up in rehab. The team's still in daily contact with him, but I think you're looking at that like Matt Stafford. He's up there in age, so obviously getting a younger guy. Sean McVay could work with Riley Leonard, but if you have a 4th and 1, you want to use him. Another team that I could see it. It's a little bit more of a stretch, but I could see it also in Seattle. So staying with the NFC West, because obviously Geno Smith's getting a little bit older. You could see him used in some different packages, almost like kind of similar to a wildcat quarterback, while him and Geno are both on the field together in that same style. It'd have to get really creative. But yeah, I think if you're going to take Riley Leonard, you have to have either an offensive coordinator or a offensive play caller that is going to have to get creative if you're going to get him on the field in any capacity.
I thought of another one, but we don't know where Russell Wilson's going to play next year. But if Russell Wilson is back in Pittsburgh, I can see Leonard in Pittsburgh for that reason. And Arthur Smith knows how to use gadget players. Mm-hmm. I think we covered it in the wide receiver episode when we talked about Savion Williams.
Yeah.
Right, because I think Arthur Smith at one point was in Tennessee, and they ran a lot of Wildcat that year. Kind of thing.
Yeah, I could see Pittsburgh.
I mean, we also talked about Taysom Hill, like Sean Payton in Denver. That's another option. I feel like he's a guy that could probably work with him. And Bo Nix is, his guy, obviously, but like somebody that could incorporate a Riley Leonard skill set, I think, into his offense.
Yep, absolutely.
I don't think Denver, like when I did a mock draft for Denver earlier today, I don't know that Denver has a significant amount of draft capital. But maybe I'm thinking, or no, that was when I did a Bengals mock draft. Never mind. Ignore me. The moderator doesn't know what he's talking about. That was a Bengals mock draft. They only had 6 picks. I think Denver's got plenty.
Yeah. I'll throw out another one too, and this is just kind of, but if Mike McCarthy goes back to Dallas, I could see Riley Leonard in Dallas too, especially with Dak coming off the injuries that he's had over the past couple of years. You want him to kind of be able to stay more in the pocket more. And if you have those short yardage runs, what's to stop him from having Riley Leonard go out there?
Yeah. So we should pause for a second and do a little bit of a commercial so that Anthony and Bill can tell everybody how to find their content. So Anthony, you want to introduce yourself and let everybody know how they can find you?
Yes, sir. So I'm Anthony Russo. You can find me on X at Anthony_Russo97. We got a brand new profile picture on. We're really jazzing up the X page these days. Follow me there. I tweet incessantly about the draft and football and why the Jets are probably doing something wrong. So, you can follow me there.
Cool. And Bill?
Yeah, so you can find me on X at Sparks Scouting. You can also find me on X at Draft Detectives as well. Also a writer and analyst for CadesDraftRoom.com. So go check out some of the articles that I've posted. Most of my content's going to be housed on X, and you're going to see me with all sorts of takes from the NFL to the NFL draft to Cleveland Browns news to planting flags left, right, and center. A lot of times my flags go up in flames, but that's fine because I planted them and I stood by them, whether they're right or wrong. Probably wrong most of the time, but yeah. Like I said, on X at Spark Scouting. Another thing I'll add as well, make sure, folks, if you're watching this video on YouTube, make sure you give us a like. Make sure you share it with your friends or your enemies if you talk to your enemies that way. Make sure that you also turn on that notification bell so you get notified when we have daily draft content on this channel, from scouting reports to analysis to everything in between. Make sure that you also follow our lovely moderator, Jim, on X at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. And I will tell you this, make sure you make your way over to draftprofessor.com for Jim's simulator. There is no other simulator like it. PFF, PFN, mock draft database. They have nothing on Jim's simulator, and it is a wonder to behold as someone who uses it pretty frequently. But Jim, enough about me gushing over your simulator. I'll turn the keys back over to you.
Thank you. So please follow the channel at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. It's the same channel on YouTube and X or Twitter. So the channel has daily draft content. So, for example, tomorrow morning, Anthony and Brian are doing a running back big board. So tune in. I think it's going to be 10 a.m. Eastern time, which is still really early in the morning for Brian, but he's on the West Coast. So we'll do running back big board. You'll also be able to catch the Quarterbacks Week's episodes. So those are replaying tomorrow and Sunday again. So every single day, this channel has content. Next week, we're back to what I'm going to say regular programming. We interrupted everything for Quarterbacks Week this week, but you will see Senior Bowl on Monday and Friday. Monday with Jake and Josh, Friday with Bill, Anthony, and Cole, probably. Tuesday, Bill, Parker, and I believe we have one new gentleman joining us to do DBs. So that'll be the last defensive back scouting report episode. Wednesday, we have Randall, Jacob, and another new person doing tight end. It's tight end scouting reports and a tight end big board. Thursday, we have a linebacker episode. So we're going to be doing a linebacker big board. And then Thursday after, or the late Thursday show is going to be an offensive line big board. So be sure to catch all of that. But like I said, we bring content to you every day. And if you go to the YouTube, there's playlists. So if you only want to see wide receivers, go to the wide receiver playlist. You only want to see offensive line, go to the offensive line playlist. You'll be able to hear scouting reports, big boards on players that you may have not heard of yet. Because we tend to cover some players here that not every other channel covers. So with that being said, if you guys were to, let's say, summarize if your team needs a quarterback and you have to kind of plot an off-season strategy. So like Anthony being a Jets fan, right? You have Tyrod Taylor's on the Jets, right? He's still under contract, right?
Yep.
So you have maybe Aaron Rodgers, maybe Tyrod Taylor, and then you drafted a quarterback. Was it last year?
Yes, they drafted Jordan Travis, 5th round, I think he was. That's
like, how would you handicap Jordan Travis against the guys that we covered tonight?
I think he's pretty comparable. I mean, Jordan Travis, I think the main thing was just he had the terrible injury, so you didn't really know what you were getting health-wise. But he the same sort of, I think, day 3 kind of, likely just back up for however long his NFL career goes. We haven't really seen Jordan Travis like at all in any capacity, so I don't know what
he didn't play in the preseason.
I don't think he didn't get much in the preseason. If he did play, I don't remember, but he hasn't played any in the regular season at this point. So I don't think we don't really know what Jordan Travis is at this point. The Jets certainly could draft a quarterback, in this sort of round 3 to 6 range, probably. Depending on, obviously, we don't know what Aaron Rodgers is what's gonna happen there. I don't think he'll be back with the Jets next year, and I kind of don't want him to be. But if you're a team that doesn't have like a clear, bona fide starter at quarterback, I think you need to. I think the avenues I would explore first are the JJ McCarthy avenue. I would explore Justin Fields, who I don't presume is coming back to Pittsburgh next season. I would explore that. I guess you can turn the stones on Kirk Cousins if he gets cut by Atlanta, but that the performances that we've seen this year would scare me a bit. It's just, I mean, and we touched on it. The supply is not nearly meeting the demand, and that's not even just in the draft. That is just across the board. Teams that need a quarterback are going to struggle to find them wherever they look. So it's it is not the offseason to need a quarterback is the focal point, I would say.
And Bill, kind of how would you kind of summarize, like if Cleveland chooses to not take a if Cleveland chooses not to take a day one quarterback, how do you handicap this group of guys that we covered and the rest of the quarterback situation around the league?
Yeah, so Anthony hit the nail on the head. This is not the year to need a quarterback, because even the guys at the top of the class, Cam Ward, Shador Sanders, they're not without faults. This isn't like last year's class. A lot of people have compared it to the Kenny Pickett class. I'll go a little bit further back. I'd compare it to like 2016. You had Goff and Wentz, who were the two top guys of that class. And then after that, QB3 was Paxton Lynch. So it's that kind of a class. And when you look to free agency, obviously, depending on what the Vikings are going to do, whether it's keep JJ and let Sam Darnold enter free agency, or keep Sam Darnold and trade JJ, or keep them both, that's kind of be the linchpin for this quarterback class, is all in Minnesota. But there are some stopgap folks in free agency. There's Jameis Winston, there's Justin Fields, like Cooper Rush, Mason Rudolph, those types of guys. You're not going to win a game with them. You're not going to win a game because of them, but you might win a game with them. But you look at this draft class, and after the probably first, 5 guys in this class, it's all backups and spot starters. So Anthony hit the nail on the head. This is not the year to need a quarterback, but if you're going to take one, you need to have a clear plan in place on what you're going to do with them. If you're going to take a Cam Ward, you need to sit him down and kind of coach some of the hero ball out of him. If you're going to take a Jalen Milroe, you've got to take it back to square one. If you're going to take a Curtis Rourke, you've got to know that you've got to build in some hot reads for your offense, because he's not going to create it. It's going to either be there or he's got to get rid of it. So it's important to know your offensive structure. And that goes back to, DNA of a rebuild, where Jim and I talked about, having an organizational structure from the ownership to the GM to the head coach to the offensive coordinator. What are we going to ask our signal caller to do? And then at that point, we need to go get a signal caller that can do that. But yeah, this is not the year to need a quarterback, either in free agency or the NFL draft.
Cool. Well, there's a lot of you watching. It's Friday night. There is a college football game on. So we will have more content coming at you next week. And I do think we have a quarterback podcast in the works for Saturday morning. And as soon as we sign off of this podcast, we're going to continue the discussion from before the podcast to maybe handicap some of the free agents that we just said and more. So if your team needs a quarterback, this channel is going to have content for you probably about every week. So Thank you very much for watching. On behalf of Anthony, Bill, myself, and the 25 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you very much, and have a great Friday, everybody.
Class is dismissed, folks.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Mrs. Are Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. Please follow the Draft Professor on YouTube, X, and Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. If you have a moment, try using some of the Draft Professor mock draft functionality, including a first-round challenge, a second-round challenge, rank players, and draft a team. Thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on our daily draft podcast tomorrow.